Hello, I'm Dr. Russ, and welcome to our backyard. We're here in southeast Michigan, and we're going to have a video about hunting. You know, not everybody has a father who teaches them how to hunt, or an uncle, or a good friend, and that's unfortunate. But it's going to end today, as this video is going to teach you how to get ready and some of the important things to look for when you're hunting with an air rifle. Before we get started on that first tip, let me share an important thing with you. YouTube and its parent Google evidently are seriously considering about taking a number of videos off the internet, particularly those that actually have kills and bloody scenes in them. We're waiting for that answer now. Notice that on this video we didn't start with any graphics or warnings about those scenes in this video, and that's because we're not going to have any of it in this video. What this video is going to do is teach you and prepare you for the key things that you need to know when you go hunting. Squirrel hunts are perfect hunts for 17 and 22 caliber rifles. They can be a lot of fun, but you need to be smarter than the squirrel. First of all, you'll want to pick hardwoods where there's plenty of acorns and nuts. You'll even look for places where they've buried them in the grass below. Now, one of the problems with squirrels is they like to stay on the other side of the tree, and they have a way of hearing you in stereo so that as you circle a tree, they can stay on the other side of a tree. So one of the ways that we can solve that problem is by taking something, anything like this. And that way, we step to the other side of our tree and we get them as they circle around, thinking that noise was you. One last tip about squirrel hunting. I think the origin of this is that they absolutely hate cats and maybe bobcats. And I know a fella who hunts squirrels, and he takes a kitten with him, puts a little yarn around the neck, and places the kitten out there in those leaves. And then he sits back, fully camouflaged. That kitten plays in the leaves, and before you know it, all kinds of squirrels come down out of their nest, and they'll actually sit on a limb and bark, 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 and try to teach that kitten a lesson and know that that kitten's in the wrong spot. And of course, that's when they get shot. That's your tips for squirrel hunting. After squirrel hunting, you might want to graduate up to some intermediate game. My favorite are these crows at my feet. But it would include woodchucks, coyotes, raccoons, ducks, geese, turkeys, and in this case, one of the things that makes me an effective hunter with crows is that I use these decoys and I use some bait. You'll want to check your state laws to make sure that it's legal in your area. But in Michigan, crows are open most of the year, and so they're not a protected species by any stretch of the imagination. But with an ample amount of this behind me, and again, crow hunting, oh my goodness, you better have good camo, you have to be well hidden, and you want to make sure that they can't see you at all. I like to hunt 50, 60 yards away so that I'm out of their range as much as possible, because they are one of the smartest animals out there. But once they get hit with 25 caliber and above, they'll go right down. And for me, that's important. You might want to use a crow call or any other call for these medium-sized animals to bring them in, as well as, in this case, popcorn. When you're wanting to hunt with decoys, you want to make sure, if it's at all possible, to have somebody with you who knows how to talk the talk. Let me tell you about this. I have a brother-in-law named Dennis, and we would go duck, goose, crow hunting, turkey hunting, and this man knew how to use a caller. We would be sitting there in our camo just as quiet as we could, and he would do some calling, and they would circle in or fly in, or they wouldn't. And when they wouldn't, he would say, well, in a low voice, well, these, whatever the animal was, aren't feeling very social right now. Let's see if they're interested in food. And he would start a different call. And if that didn't bring him in, he said, well, I guess we're going to have to use sex. And he would do a third call, and I swear to you, those things would circle back in and land right out in front of us. So talking to animals, as well as using a good placement of decoys, can make it a lot of fun. Of course, you want to be all that you can be when it comes to shooting, and that's practice, 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 making your groups get tighter and tighter and tighter. Be sure and watch my 9th video on breathing techniques, squeezing techniques, etc. I'm sure they're going to help you. When I practice, I have this range I have built, and one of the favorites I have is this block of steel down here. And notice, when you hit it, it doesn't make much noise. But in this circle, I call it the center of the bull, or in this case, the heart of an animal. And when a pellet can go through here, it makes plenty of noise. Another thing is hitting these pipes, and they make a nice noise. But there's all kinds of good targets, spinner targets. This is an old gargoyle made out of cement that I painted black, and I've certainly shot it in a number of times. On my post, you'll see a number of cast iron frying pans that create quite a gong sound, along with a bell on the left and a couple of coyotes on the right. And as you can see, we've made shooting here just as fun as possible. Well, it's time to get hunting. When it comes to deer hunting, I know the stories. In fact, I witnessed a story where somebody has actually killed a deer with a 22 pellet behind the ear. I'm sure an even 17 caliber placed correctly can kill a deer. But that doesn't tell about all the wounded deer. And the last thing we want to keep our sport vibrant and fair and out of the news is to have some wounded deer end up on a farmer's front porch or front yard or neighbors, and they see this wounded animal and it has to be put out of its misery. So I like 30 caliber or 357 like this Benjamin Bulldog in an effort to make sure that when I get the deer, I still have to place the round carefully, but there's a much better chance I'm going to put it down and it's going to stay down with these larger bores. So let's start with the bigger calibers. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that we've got some exciting videos coming up this spring and summer. One is a speedboat that will pull a barge across this pond, and targets will be sitting on that barge. And I've got to shoot them while they're moving. And you probably saw it in the introductory video, but we're going to spend serious time with our drone pulling explosive white powder targets underneath it and hit it moving, going through the air. That's to come this summer. Now, one of the ways you'll know you'll get in on those is if you subscribe. And the worst thing that's going to happen to you in a subscription is that every 2 weeks you're going to get a notice on your email that says another video has come out from Dr. Russ. I hope you enjoy them enough to subscribe. And if you enjoy this one, give us a thumbs up. All of this helps us with that problem I was talking about with YouTube and Google wanting to do away with educational videos like this. Let's get on with our hunt. One of the places we want a good deer hunt to start is probably a couple of months before the season opens, where we get out and find out the patterns of deer in this hunt area. We want to find out where they bed and where they eat, because during the night they're going to be eating, and during the day they're going to try to bed down. And the most successful hunts will take deer while they're doing that movement, early morning, late fall. That's why you want good optics to make sure it's the deer you want, or that it's a buck instead of a doe. But you also want to know something about tracks, and let me share that with you. A regular 2-print hoof is probably a doe, and tiny ones, of course, are the fawns. You'll see them near the doe prints. What does a buck print look like? Well, first of all, it's deeper and it's bigger. Why? He's lumbering along with a set of horns that can weigh 20, 30 pounds on his head. And so particularly those front feet are making bigger and deeper prints. We want to know where he's traveling. And guess what? He doesn't travel with the does and the fawns. He travels in a parallel manner, usually on higher ground, watching the does as they go. So when I see in the woods some does and the fawns coming, that's not where I'm watching. I'm looking higher up where I've already spotted his trail, and I'm waiting for him to make an appearance along that trail. That's the way you hunt for a big buck. Once you've shot a buck, and hopefully you've placed it well, I like to shoot it a shape about the size of a basketball, standing on those front legs. I might do it from a frontal, I might do it from a side, often an angle shot, but I'm always aiming at this fictitious basketball, and that's where all the key organs are. I'm not worried about where the lungs are, the heart is. I'm just aiming for that basketball. I shared in another video that I actually shot from behind a trophy buck. I'll have to show him to you one day in the house. But I had a rear shot, and I knew that cavity from his butt end up with the ribs on each side was just as easy a place to place a bullet as possible. And it went right up through, and instead of blowing out organs on the side, they went out the front, and he dropped in his tracks. And it took us about 6 months to eat all of him. A couple of things that you'll want to know about tracking. After you shoot them, stay very still. First of all, they don't know where it came from. They don't know if a bobcat swiped at them, a coyote barked at them. They just don't know what. And in some areas, maybe even a panther. So they run as hard and as fast as their heart will let them. They'll even hit a few trees. They want to get out of there so fast. But after a sprint, 50 yards, 100 yards, their ears are cocked back, and they're listening to see if anything is following them. And when those ears don't have a sound behind them, hey, your sound, they'll then do what we call a J hook. And they'll do a J. They'll either do it to the right, they'll do it to the left, and they'll lay down and they'll watch back down their trail for whatever this evil thing was that shot them. As we follow the track, and we're looking for specks of blood, very tiny specks, and in the fall, there's little red specks everywhere on those leaves. Some use like a Windex bottle, and they spray peroxide out in front of them like this. And as that mist falls, and it hits not just red on a leaf, but red blood, it does a white bubble. And that way we can see from these white marks where that buck is going. That's one good way to follow him through heavy leaves in the fall time. But we constantly look up and we check every branch on the ground. It'll look like, those horns will look like branches. So you've got to look at them very carefully and say, is that a branch or is that antlers lifting up? And somewhere beyond 50 to 100 yards, that's usually where he'll make his J-hook. Now, one of the greatest lessons I ever learned was from a Cherokee Indian. And we were on a fall hunt, and we got to a place like this. And I looked, and I couldn't find where that deer had gone. And he got down on one knee, and he looked up the trail. And he stood very still. I even started to move. He held his hand out. I was not to move. For maybe 10 minutes, he stared right up that hill. I didn't make a move. And finally he said, I know where he went. And I said, how do you know where he went? And he says, you get down here on your knee and let's see if you can tell me. I got down on my knee. I stared for 10 minutes. I couldn't tell a thing. He said, we're not looking for tracks. We're looking for a disturbance through the woods where just a couple of leaves blew off because of his speed coming up this hill. Look again. And I looked, and I looked, and then I saw it. He actually went up the hill and started down the left side. He then told me, he said, you've hit the deer good. When a deer gets hit good, he's losing his power, and he'll decline down the elevation instead of climbing it. We all want to be as high up as we can if we're hurt. We'd like to climb a tree or climb a hill and look back on that J-hook. But if you just don't feel good enough, you decline down. If our deer had gone higher up the hill, he'd say, you didn't hit him well. It's important that we find him. It's important that we finish him off so that he doesn't end up on some farmer's porch or that he gets away and we end up shooting 2 deer to fill 1 tag. It was a lesson I never forgot. So I've always been very careful with shot placement, sitting in my blind for a good 10-15 minutes. He's not getting away. It's important that he doesn't hear me coming. And then I slowly get down and I slowly take off in the way that he ran. Maybe spraying some peroxide if I have to keep an eye on that trail. Please know that we've got some more hunt videos and hunt video tips planned for the future, at least as long as YouTube and Google allow us to do that. Secondly, make sure you know the state laws in your area. There are protected species and unprotected species. Third, know that I respond personally to every comment that's left below these videos. So leave a comment. Let me know how you feel and perhaps something that's happened to you on a hunt trip. And know this, each time you go hunting, a day in the field is better than a day behind the lawnmower.